Hello and welcome to this webcast as part of the Single Sales Principles series. And on this webcast we're going to be looking at closing skills. We're going to be looking at it in a couple of directions really. We're going to be looking at it in terms of the tools and techniques that can be used for closing. But then we're going to move on to looking at the attitude behind closing, because that can form a far bigger part around whether you get a successful close or not than the tools and techniques you actually use at that particular point. Let me just rewind first to start with though and explain whereabouts this closing bit fits. If you apply the pure principles behind the single sales principle, actually you may not even need to get to a close at all, because the buyer will do it for you. If we have a compelling need that is met by a credible solution that in the mind of the person that we're talking to, our customer, actually offers perceived value, then people will buy. And at that point, we can drop all of these old-fashioned tools and techniques around closing and the games that we play at the end of the process. Because, do you know what? The solution we've offered meets the needs that they have. They believe it offers them great value. Of course they want it. Anything else would be ridiculous. And that's why the whole principle behind it, where we want to get to, is moving away from the old self-centric type of selling, where it's all about the close. It's all about getting the other person to make the decision. And moving into a case where, do you know what, we've spent so much time really understanding the customer, so we've presented our stuff that is relevant to the customer's needs, that we don't need to spend a great deal of time down at this tough decision bit of the triangle. It's a much more client or customer-centric approach to selling than we've had in the past. However, the reality is we do need to close more often than not, even if it's just to go through the process, to go through that particular loop that says, do you know what, we have now finished and it's now time to get the order signed, to get the agreement, to get the customer to say yes. The two areas that we're going to look at are first off the tools that are used. There are a million different closing tools out there. It's almost an infinite list. I'm going to pull out some of them, some of the key ones that are used. There are variations on these. There are different bits of terminology for different ones of these closers. But the reality is they are all tools to use to just nudge people over the edge, to give them that impetus to say yes or to sign the deal, to sign the contract. That'll be the first part of this webcast. The second part is going to be about the attitudinal side. We need to make sure that we're absolutely ready to ask the questions that need to be asked. By the time we get to the end of the process, we need to feel really comfortable in putting that question forward. And I'm just going to talk to you briefly at the end of this webcast about why that might be an issue and one particular tool that I use to overcome that slight fear that kicks in about closing it down at the end. So let's rewind and start with some of the tools. On the promotional material for this webcast, you will have seen that we've been talking about the Benjamin Franklin close. That's this gentleman here. The Benjamin Franklin close is, as a blue from an insights profile, one of my particular favourites, because it's an analytical close. The way that you use this particular close is, as you get towards the end of the process and the buyer or the customer that you've got in front of you is not quite ready to make that decision and there's a degree of wavering, what you actually do is you do some analysis about the good side and the bad side about making the decision that you want them to make. You do the list of the pros and the cons. And obviously from a sales point of view, we want to ensure that the list of the pros is far, far longer than the list of the cons, or at least has got far more powerful content within there than the list of the cons. But it's an analytical process, and the more we can engage our customer in that analytical process and prove to them with incontrovertible data, incontrovertible evidence that they're making the right decision by going with our prospect, with our solution, the better. So that is the Benjamin Franklin close, the analytical approach. A slightly more psychological approach is what's known as the porcupine approach. I particularly love this one because it fits in with my desire to ask customers questions all the time. And the reason it's called the porcupine close is because if you're going to stroke a porcupine, you need to be really, really careful about it. And equally, if we're going to answer a customer's question, we need to be really careful about doing that as well, particularly right at the end of the sales process. One of the things that customers do, and this can work in a business to consumer environment as well as a business to business environment. Some buyers are trained to do this, others do it purely from an instinct point of view, or perhaps a bit of nervousness from their point of view, is actually get to the end and they start asking questions. And what they're trying to do, for either trickery reasons or to wiggle out of a situation, is they're trying to ask you questions to say, no, that's not really possible, to give them an excuse to get out of making the deal. So, for example, does this particular product come in blue? Can I have delivery of it next week? They're trying to ask these sort of questions that will enable them to have a rationale, to have a really good high quality excuse for saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to back off. It's not something that I can go with. We need to be really, really careful about answering those questions, because as soon as we give a no, it doesn't come in blue, or no, I'm afraid delivery can't be achieved by next week, that gives them the get out clause that they're looking for. What we actually want to do at this point is ask them another question back. It's back to the sort of Socratic questioning. So, if they say it's absolutely essential, does this come in blue? You ask them a question about it. What's important about that for you? If they say, actually, I'll have it if it comes next week, they're putting that conditional element on it. Okay, tell me a little bit about the urgency that you've got in place. Would be a way of opening it up and softening it. So we're not giving them that excuse to say no. That's how we would deal with it with a porcupine close. The next close I want to talk to you about is what I call the hypothetical close. The hypothetical close is where we offer an option to the customer, but we offer it in a hypothetical sense. It's not definitely out there on the table. It's an if statement. If I did this, if this could be achieved, if this were a possibility, then would you be in a position to buy? Then would you want to sign today? Then would you want to put the order in? What we're looking at here is effectively testing the water. It's a bit of a testing motivation type question, as we talk about in the single sales principle program, but we use it at the end as well, just to see in a slightly more gentle than a direct close way how close we are to getting the deal that we're looking for. So we call it the sharp angle close or the hypothetical close, lots of different bits of terminology for it. But it's basically saying, if we move down this direction, will you move down that direction? Without definitely offering anything up to that particular customer yet. The next close is a blindingly obvious one. It's one of the most commonly used ones, but I've got to mention it anyway because it works. It works really, really well. There is a deadline in place. This is a limited time offer. There's a limited number of products available. I fell for this one like an absolute sucker recently, and I'm hoping that this product is going to get delivered to me in the next couple of weeks or so. I've ordered something for camping trips across the course of this summer, and it's in really, really short supply, regardless of who I order it from. There's none in the country at the moment. There's a 4-week deadline. Orders are filling up. There's one shipment coming in, and if I don't order now, they can't guarantee that I will be able to get it in advance of my first planned camping trip of the year. Did that make me press the button and send money to a foreign country, to an organisation I'd never heard of, and give them my credit card details? Absolutely it did. Because that sense of a deadline, that keenness to actually get this product in advance of my need to have it, or my desire, my want to have it for the first camping trip, is a really, really powerful thing. So despite the fact I know that this is what they were doing to me during the sales process, it still works. It's incredibly powerful. It needs to be a real deadline, and as with all of these closes, if it comes across as the fact that we're playing games with our buyers and we're trying tricks on them, and there's any level of dishonesty, because it will undermine our credibility and any trust that we built up, it's just not going to work. But if it's true, and if you do have a deadline in place, and if there is a limited supply or timing issues and those sort of things, use it, because that might just be enough for the buyer to justify to themselves the decision that it takes to nudge them over the line to say yes. This next close, again, is a piece of my terminology that I use for this close. It's the rock and a hard place close. So you could do this, you could do that. And we talk about things being in a really positive way in a lot of sales environments. You know, how great it would be if this happens and what a wonderful solution this would be to the needs that you have and all of that sort of stuff. It's great. It puts a real smile on people's faces. But don't forget the dark side of it as well. Put your buyer, if necessary, between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, this might be more expensive than you're used to. This might be a big change and a big challenge for you. It's an awful place. It's the rock. But the hard place is even worse than that, because this is a direction that your competitors are going down. That if you don't do this, other people will. We've been out with clients recently selling to professional clients, not professional buyers, but very professional people. And there's a degree of a rock and a hard place here, because these professional people that we're selling to are fishing in a very small pool for resources, and we're offering them the opportunity to fish in a much, much better way. But if they don't take that opportunity and others do, actually others will be pulling more and more fish out of this small pond, and they will be caught on the back foot. And that's one of the great things about the rock and a hard place close, is if the customer's competitors or other people around the customer are doing this thing, we can use that to push them over the edge, because if they don't get in there first, they're going to be moved further and further and further behind their competition. So we can put our customers in the nicest possible way we can get away with, and maybe with a cheeky smile on our face, between a rock and a hard place. The next close, again, a really common one, I want to flick back to a common one, is the assumptive close. I love this phrase. It's a classic traditional management training phrase, and I'm not going to explain it on camera because obviously there's a slightly rude word in there, which I'm sure you can work out. But we use the assumptive close to say, do you know what, this is going to happen anyway. So are you ready to sign? Is something we can push even further into, just sign here and we'll get the order done. It could be something as simple as, we've got 2 delivery slots next week or the week after, which one of those would you like? The underlying assumption in there is it is going to happen anyway. Therefore, all we need to do is adjust a few of the little logistics. What you're not doing with the assumptive close is actually asking the question, do you want to buy? All you're doing is asking more detailed questions about how do you want the ordering process to work? How do you want the delivery process to work? It puts in place the assumption that the decision has already been made. And just as buyers might use their sort of questioning in the porcupine one to give them wiggle room to get out, this does the opposite from a seller's point of view. What this does is it removes any wiggle room. It means that they have no need to wriggle anymore. And actually, it's just really easy for them to say, great, well, next week works better for me. That's the assumptive close. We also have the options close, choosing from different alternatives, the alternative close. Would you like this one or this one or this one? Would you like it in red or blue or green? Those sort of things. It's a bit of a version of the assumptive close, but we are laying out options. The big power of this is actually we are putting the power back in the minds of the customer, in their mind. They believe they're fundamentally making a powerful decision at this point. The reality is they're not. The decision to buy has already been made. It's just tweaking around the margins at this point. But because they feel that sense of control about it, because they feel that they are making a decision, even if it's not the biggest and most fundamental decision, they will feel better about the process and they will feel more comfortable feeling that they are in control of what's going on. So offering people options is a really, really powerful thing to do. The next 2 that I want to take you through are varieties of the same thing. But it leads into this idea of, well, how do we actually get across the psychological challenge of asking the tough closing question at the end of the process? One closing technique that is often used, and there's nothing wrong with this at all, but we need to be aware of when we're using it, is what we call either the soft close, or I like to call it the marshmallow close. It's where we get a bit squidgy and a bit soft and a bit warm and cuddly towards the end. And we're asking very gentle questions about, what does the customer think about this? How do you feel about this? What's your opinion? What are your thoughts? So after we've presented our proposition, presented our solution to the customer, we get them engaged and we're interested in their views on what we've done, as if it's a truly collaborative process, which it may well be. And that's fantastic. Don't be afraid of using this close, but equally don't use this close because you're afraid of doing it the right way, of actually being a bit more direct and a bit more bullish about it and asking a really nice direct close yes or no question. Would you like to go ahead with this order? Are you interested in this proposal? Are you going to sign today? Sometimes we need to get that closed question out there. We need to see the buying signals, we need to get the indications that the other person is actually interested in what we've been talking about, but hopefully that's been going on right the way through the process anyway. But what we need to do is make sure that we have the guts, to use the politer version of the expression, to ask the question at the end. Are you going to buy? Yes or no? And this is one of the areas that at the end of a sales process I see missing more than just about anything else. Do we have the heart? Do we have the emotional capability of asking that really direct question of somebody? Because we're exposing ourselves massively at this point. We've done all the work, we've asked all the questions, we've made our cell sizzle and all of that sort of great stuff. And then comes crunch time. And the crunch time is, have I done a good enough job or not? Are they going to say yes or not? My little trick, my little tool for helping me get over the nerves involved in actually asking that question is to do one thing above all else. I need to get myself in a position where I know mentally that this is the right decision for the buyer to take, that they would be mad not to say yes to it. So that when I get to the point of asking the question, would you like to go ahead? I'm expecting a yes because of course it's the only sensible thing for them to do. But it also gives me the little option, if they say no, which does happen from time to time, of basically acting really, really surprised. Shock, horror. I'm astonished by that. And put that into your voice, put that into your body language. Make sure that they know you are really, really surprised that they're not saying yes to you. Because if you do that, that will enable them to have the opportunity to start to explain why, and we can go back through the process and start all over again. We need to make sure, from this emotional point of view, that we are absolutely ready and committed to getting a yes at the beginning of the process, because we've done the prep with the customer, we know this is the right thing for them, and then we have the right to act surprised at the end if they say anything other than what we're going in to get, which is, of course, the yes. Thank you very much for listening to this webcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next week for the next one. If you've got any questions, email us. If you want us to cover anything different, email us. Get in touch, and it'd be lovely to hear from you. Thank you very much.